Good afternoon. Great to see you all here. Thank you for being here. I'm Dale Petrosky, and it's my great privilege to serve as CEO of the Dallas Regional Chamber. And some news hot off the press. Last week, we were named one of the top 3 chambers in the United States. Thank you. And in Indianapolis, in July, they'll name the top 1 of those top 3. But we're glad to be making it to the top 3, and I think we have a pretty good chance once we get there. So we'll see what happens. I'm, by the way, so proud of our team. And the reason we're one of the top 3 chambers in the country is because I'm sure we have the best staff of any chamber in the country. And those of you who work with us, you know that because they are top professionals and their heart is in it and they work really hard every day on these issues. So thank you. And thanks to all of our member companies because you make us the chamber that we are too. So we really appreciate everything you do, and hopefully we're doing good by you and earning your trust every day and earning your membership dues every day. We really appreciate it. Each year, by the way, this is our 3rd annual State of Early Education event. It's sponsored by PNC Bank. So Brendan, thank you. Amber, thank you. Really appreciate you. And each year, the need for high-quality early education becomes more and more important for our business community, for our parents, and for our kids. And we couldn't have events like this if we didn't have great sponsors. So PNC, we appreciate you. Dallas College, where's Justin? Is he here? Oh, there's Dallas College. Okay, great. Dallas College, thank you very much for sponsoring. I know you are very committed to this early education work, and we do appreciate it. We work hand in glove with Dallas College on all of our education and workforce needs. I want to say a couple of words about the DRC and our mission. Our mission is to make the Dallas region the best place in America for all people to live, work, and do business. And that all starts with delivering a quality education to every student in our community. The business community needs good workers. We need talented workers who are well educated and trained so they can do the jobs that need to be done here so we can keep growing. On the other hand, every person deserves the chance for a good education, a good job, and a good life. So it all goes hand in glove. Okay. And when we take companies around and show them the Dallas region and all the advantages here, the one question they really want answered is, what's the talent pool like? You know, how educated is your workforce? Can we come here and feel good that we have the workers that we need to do the jobs that need to be done? And more, research is showing that the earlier we start investing in students, the better. Because we all know this stat. 95% of the brain is developed in the first 5 years of life. Think about that. So why wouldn't we invest in early education? The other thing is, the other piece of this is childcare. We need great childcare where our kids can be stimulated so that parents can go off to work feeling peace of mind that their kids are getting a good day's worth of care and education at the same time. So that's a big part of it too. So we're proud to be able to provide this kind of programming. Today you're going to hear from one of our bright young stars in this community, Mayor Parker of Fort Worth, someone who cares deeply about these issues. She also understands the importance of partnerships and collaboration, which we appreciate. And she has championed creative solutions to early education matters. So we appreciate that. So we're so excited that you're here, Mayor Parker, and thanks for making the trip over to see us today. I was telling the mayor earlier, I've known her husband, David, for a long time. He's sort of one that everybody knows in this community, has done a lot of government relations work for AT&T and others, but now we're very excited to be working very closely with you. So,
my name is Jared Toussaint, the Senior Vice President of our Education and Workforce team here at the DRC, and it's my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker this afternoon. This person is someone who I'm a big fan of, the Honorable Mattie Parker. Mayor Parker was elected 45th mayor of Fort Worth in 2021. And prior to her election, she was the founding CEO of the Tarrant To and Through Partnership. She has more than 15 years of experience in national, state, and local public affairs, including her tenure as Chief of Staff to the Mayor of Fort Worth and City Council. In addition to her public service, Mayor Parker has served on the board of the Gateways Legacy Early Learning Academy, Read Fort Worth, Operation Progress, and ACH Child and Family Services. Following Mayor Parker's remarks, we will be joined by my good friend, Amber Scanlon, a Senior Vice President and Director of Talent at and Community Relations for PNC Bank, for a fireside chat.
Well, thanks for inviting me to come speak with you today. I'll try to stay close to the podium, but if I wander, I'll grab a microphone a bit. This is a topic that is easy for me to talk about, not just because I've spent a lot of years really studying the importance and the future of early childhood education, but it's deeply personal to me, and some of that I'll kind of get into a little bit as well. I'll start with this, and these are stats. I've talked to you, a few of you before we started today. There's a lot of familiar faces. These are not unfamiliar to you. Each of you in your respective roles in this community probably know them well, but I'll start and kind of frame where I think this conversation should head, especially as business leaders and because the Dallas Regional Chamber is hosting us here this afternoon. When school resumed in the fall of 2020, 80% of the 1.1 million people who had left the workforce were women. 80%. We are currently at a 33-year low in female participation in the workforce, right? But I want to impart on you, this is not just a woman issue. This is really an American family issue, because 40% of American families, the breadwinner is a woman in that family, right? Many single mothers, but also two-income families where the woman is leading in income and considered the breadwinner. And if you also couple this, and there's plenty of articles if you want to bore yourself, right, and the consideration by economists on what's really happening with inflation, but I can promise you, childcare absolutely is at the center of this conversation and how it's impacting a woman's ability to go back to work, especially in a post-COVID environment. And we frankly have a long way to go to help solve some of that. So when I was asked to produce this keynote speech and then have a conversation with my friend Amber, I tried to think about if I were you and you had to listen to another politician talk about another topic, to try to make it easy for you to have some takeaways and maybe emboldened for what we can do and be solutions oriented, not just in North Texas and in this area and our state, but really across the United States. The good news is this: the private sector will solve this problem. The government will not solve this problem. You've seen Republican administrations and Democratic administrations propose different solutions, and they still get stopped, right? So rather than be discouraged, which is not where I try to operate from, I'm pretty much a glass half full kind of person. I really take the tactic of what can private sector do to push the public sector to be better, right? And also have their own innovations in your own businesses to help serve families differently. And by the way, it really does happen, really happens to help your bottom line as well. So right now we understand that businesses in the United States, this is a rough estimate, are losing about $13 billion annually in costs due to childcare challenges in their own businesses. It's really just lost workforce opportunity among their workers because of childcare challenges. We know, furthermore, that the American success story really depends on how we treat our youngest Americans. This is not just smart economics in the United States. So sometimes I kind of pivot my talk depending on the audience I'm in. I'm in an audience of friends and colleagues that understand this issue, so it's easier to get in the weeds with you. But sometimes you'll walk in a room of people that really just care about the bottom line, and so you can pivot and just talk about ROI and why that really matters to early child education, how they should care. Unfortunately, we still see this stagnation in policy change in the United States of America. And by stagnation, I mean actually zero. Like nothing has really changed. We've done nothing in the area of policy, except arguably at a local and state level, occasionally we see some wins. So no offense to my counterparts in Washington and Austin. I'm incredibly thankful for their leadership and wouldn't want their jobs. But I think, frankly, part of the reason you haven't seen change in DC and even in Texas is their lived experiences are not the same as mine, right? There was so much attention paid to my taking on as mayor in Fort Worth as the youngest mayor of a big city. I'm now joined the ranks in a few other communities in the United States, including Mayor Wu in Boston, who's just a year younger than me and also has young children. But I can promise you that my lived experience, especially when it comes to this issue, matters. And your policymakers in Austin and Washington do not look like me. They are not in the same stage of life. And it makes it very difficult. You have a few one-off examples, but it's very difficult to get a large group of people that have a lot of competing interests and policy issues, crises to deal with, to focus on this one, except sometimes when you talk about the economics and really what the return on investment is, not only for our communities, but the entire country. And frankly, I believe and hope I'll make the case today that our livelihood and the American dream really depends on getting this issue right here at home. As many of you can attest, the juggle and struggle is real in the middle of parenthood. My husband and I at one point were paying for college tuition and child education. My daughter's tenure at Tech was less expensive than Montessori school was for our youngest, who was 4 at the time, right? This is an incredibly debilitating cost for American families, and unfortunately not getting much better. So how do we really make a difference? And it's through policymakers trying to convince them to really help the American family. So first, as I mentioned before, it's focused on the economics and the ROI. You can read a different study, and all of them maybe say different things, but in general, for every dollar invested in early education, the return on that investment is between $7 and $12, right? Depending on regional experience. All in all, it just makes good dollar cents to make the investments. We also know, as Dale mentioned, 95% of brain development all happens before the age of 5, okay? We talk about that, everybody knows it. We have a lot of people give speeches on it, but we don't do anything to change it. Because in the US right now, on average, this is pretty staggering, we only spend about $500 per child to educate our youngest under age 5. Compare that to what we spend in K through 12 education at $14,000, okay? Which we can have a debate if that's enough also. But just look at the difference. So you got 95% of brain development happening before age 5, and you're spending $500, right? Compare that to K through 12, spending over $14,000, and then compare us to other developed nations that are leading the way in innovation and education. Places like Norway, spending $30,000. Places like Germany, spending $20,000. By the way, that's on age 5 and under education for their kids and their students across their countries. We can and must be better to really continue the American dream. So, frankly, our investments just don't make sense. So first, the problem is really around what can we do to address some of this, what is working, what can the government and public sector and people like myself in our respective cities do to be different. So we already talked about that early education starts well before pre-kindergarten. As I was sharing with a few people before, there's a lot of push right now about universal pre-K in our school districts. A lot of that has to do with declining enrollment. It makes a lot of sense to draw those families into your school districts, provide high quality education, and then get them into kindergarten. I have no problem with that. I'm not going to get in that debate. That's fine. But I can promise you as community members, you need to ask this question. How are they deploying universal pre-K in your school district? If they are not using a community-based partnership model, they will bankrupt the child care facilities that exist today that are so fragile and barely hanging on. And it's very simple. You get more money for your 3 and 4-year-olds, right? It allows you to subsidize and pay for infant care, right? Across the entire North Texas region right now, the biggest struggle is finding infant care for families, right? For a lot of families, it doesn't exist. I just talked to a girlfriend of mine who works for Meta, has probably the best family-friendly policies in the country. She's trying to go back to work after 9 months of maternity leave. She's been on list for 2 years for infant care, and she cannot find early child education or child care in her community, and she's gonna have to turn to a nanny. That's mind-blowing to me, and that's in Fort Worth, Texas. And by the way, her husband works for Amazon. 2 companies that have done everything they can to support families, and the system really itself is failing you. So number 1, ask those questions. What school districts do your kids attend? Where is your business located? And how are they deploying pre-K and how can we be better? And if they want to know more in Tarrant County, we have a lot of great ideas around that, especially my friend Kara Waddell with CCA, and I'll talk about some of those solutions as well. So that's number one. You also understand that childcare educators oftentimes get left behind, and there's so much discussion around this topic. And I'm not specifically talking yet about our four-year degree educators, right, which most of them serve in our K through 12 systems. But I'm talking about usually the women that serve in our childcare facilities that are taking care of your babies and my babies, that are high-quality childcare educators that make less than a cashier at Buc-ee's in this country, right? We can be better than that, and the way we're creating investments and workplace incentives for those people to actually stay in their jobs, grow in their careers. And we've done several things in Tarrant County that I think are successful, but some of this is truly systemic, and it's going to take a lot of different efforts in policy making that I can do some of it at a city level and working with Tarrant County as well. But truthfully, in Texas, a lot of this responsibility and push will need to be at a policy level, Texas Workforce Commission, an agency many of you probably have worked with before, fully capable to get it done, but it's a large bureaucracy. And so a lot of my advocacy efforts next session will be spent around at an agency level. How can we really move the needle in Texas as well? So I mentioned pre-K, that debate continues. I think that's something that we can do locally to ask to be better. In Tarrant County, when I was chief of staff for Mayor Price, she was mayor for 10 years, and I was chief for almost 6. And this was the predominant area that I really wanted to focus on. Luckily, Betsy gave you the bully pulpit to do so. She cared about it a lot. And we had some of the foremost minds in the country that live in Tarrant County that are helping us further some of this work. We're incredibly grateful for that. But even in Tarrant County, it's not been without a lot of struggle and helping get things off the ground. I think to myself and joke, Sarah Reddington's here with Best Place for Working Parents, the Wiles Foundation, and we started Best Place for Working Parents. It was over happy hour at the Fort Worth Club, where any good idea starts, right? And it was really this thought of, okay, we're frustrated, we keep getting blocks in certain ways. What can the private sector do to help make a difference? And you'll learn more about that today when they present business awards. But for me, I'll talk about Best Place for Working Parents and the why, and why I support that as mayor as well. But before that, we had to really think about, we had one-time huge investments, mostly through CARES Act and ARPA dollars in all of our counties and cities. And those of you that live in Dallas and Dallas County, you should go back and ask your county judge and your mayor, I'll gig on my friend Merrick Johnson a little bit, what investments they've been making in early childhood education as well, right? So in the city of Fort Worth, we took $7 million of ARPA funding and went to Child Care Associates and say, what could you do with $7 million? And CARE would say, I just need to help with my buildings. The infrastructure that my babies go in matters deeply, and we have a lot of trouble drawing down federal funds to that. It's non-existent, frankly. They can't bond like you can for schools. So we took $7 million to invest in 3 different facilities that are high-need areas in Tarrant County. Incredibly excited about that project. We also gave $3 million for the Center for Transforming Lives to build a phenomenal holistic child care facility in South Fort Worth and turning a hard corner in our city that's needed a lot of investment for a long time, and partnered with that nonprofit as well. So those are 2 investments we made that we knew didn't need long-term dollars. They were capital expenses that we could take off the table for them, and they could fundraise for other costs as well. But there's a lot more happening as well. So we started working months ago knowing that Tarrant County was gonna have a large tranche of money, and Judge Whitley agreed, I'm willing to do the hard work to make this happen. So just this last May, they announced a $45 million investment in Tarrant County that will focus on childcare. This could be transformative and will be transformative in Tarrant County. The bucket of money is broad in terms of the uses. We're kind of working on that. You'll have applications come out. But the City of Fort Worth and other partners in nonprofit community are working alongside Tarrant County to deploy those funds in a really wise way to make long-term investments for early childhood education in our communities. Incredibly excited. We also took $2 million of ARPA dollars that really went through Workforce Commission to focus on the workforce piece. Paying workers more money matters, right? These women that are taking care of your children deserve to be treated with dignity and respect and make a living wage. It shouldn't be that difficult, right? Yeah. And so, but so this is a pilot really for $2 million. There are billions coming in through Workforce Commission and federal funding. How they subsidize childcare will matter. And the great thing is quality is a big topic, right, in Texas. And all of you probably know about Texas Rising Star, whether you're a 3-star or 4-star, and how hard it is to get them there. We're not here to debate that. But trying to convince them you can actually help create incentives like we have in Tarrant County through Workforce Solutions, which is simple. You pay more money per child for a family looking for childcare if they choose a 4-star facility. So guess what happens? Competition works, and your childcare facilities are going, hey, I'm 2-star, but if I'm gonna get more money and more families, I wanna be 4-star. How quickly can I get there? So providing that technical assistance really is a game changer for us in Tarrant County, and that continues to evolve as well. We also just confirmed a new lease with Child Care Associates, a 30-year lease in partnership with the City of Fort Worth and Child Care Associates to provide a wonderful child care facility in one of our at-risk zip codes in the entire city. And I think you're going to see that entire community transform, provide stability. Mobility is a huge issue in education, as many of you know. Western Hills Elementary School, which is this wonderful, sweet school in that area of our city, their mobility rate is 30% right now, right? Meaning 30% of their kids move schools, sometimes as many as 3 times, especially in those early grade levels before age 5. A student cannot learn at grade level and be successful in all the many things we're throwing at them as a state if we don't work on mobility. And we think this child care facility could kind of create this anchor for families to want to stay in an LVT area and go all the way through 5th grade in that elementary school experience. So things we're really excited about as well. The other last thing I wanted to kind of pivot to, and the second piece is maybe encouraging, is what can our private sector businesses do? So many of you probably work for pretty progressive companies, or you wouldn't have come to this in the first place, about what's happening in your own boardrooms. How are you supporting families with family-friendly policies? And to be overly simple of what the Best Place for Working Parents initiative is and how we've spread across the country, it's just that. How do you support all size businesses, small, medium, and large, in creating a different toolkit of action plans you can create and family-friendly policies to not only keep your employees, retain, and also attract employees to your workforce? And I'm telling you, when they did a survey in conjunction with SMU, and you get all this data back, it screams at you to say 80% of people would move, change, stay just for that purpose alone. In other words, it's not just about money. It's how you treat people as well and help companies. A few of my friends have heard me tell this story. When I was on staff with Mayor Price, I had our 3rd child, and I waited. I was done having babies at that point. And I came back to work after maternity leave, and I realized the city of Fort Worth, one of our largest employers in our city, had no maternity leave, right? We had medical leave, right? Or they called it disability. And I was sitting in a room, candidly, room full of men. I was the only woman. I'd just come back, and we've all been through that. Like, your hormones are kind of high, and I'm pumping at the office, and the whole thing is miserable. And so it's probably the wrong time to ask me the question. And I just said, this is ridiculous. I can have maternity leave because I work for the mayor and the city manager, and I'm pretty sure they're going to give me what I need. But across the hall, when you have a brand new paralegal or attorney in the city attorney's office or an employee in the water department, they have to accrue years of service at the city of Fort Worth to really have enough to cobble together to have paid leave. We can be better. So we created a 6-week program, and on Tuesday, I'm going to tell the city manager we're going to make it 12 and keep pushing, right? Because if we want to attain, it's really a low bar, frankly. Your body's not healed at 12 weeks when you get back to work, but I'll get what I can get. And I mention that only because these are small things that we need to be asking ourselves in your own workplaces, and put yourself in the position of a young mother or young father who wants to be able to be home and be helpful, especially in those critical months and years of a child's life. And we just have not been asking those questions the right way to support workers. And I can promise you now, I had this conversation with a friend who's an attorney in the city attorney's office who was contemplating leaving the city prior to us changing policy. And she'd been offered a big firm job actually here in Dallas, making much more money. And she stayed with the city of Fort Worth because that was the issue. It wasn't even money. It was how she was being treated from both with healthcare and with family-friendly policies for her family to feel supported as an employee in the city of Fort Worth. So an anecdotal story, but it truly does work. In closing, we can talk about this a little bit with Amber as well. We're doing a lot of things. We announced a Blue Ribbon committee in partnership with some of the brightest minds, not just in Fort Worth and North Texas, around some of these complex problems. What we hope to do is this is an action-oriented committee, so that when we are advocating in Austin next session, or even going to DC on some of these policies that are happening, we can pull some of the levers we've learned, not only from public sector officials, but also from private sector officials as well. And in closing, then I'll switch over and join my friend Amber in our discussion. This is a fun time to be mayor, but it's also a full contact sport. There's a lot of competing interests and no shortage issues that people like to tweet at you on social media and try to refocus your efforts. But Fort Worth is right now the largest, fastest growing city in the country, right? We hover between 12th and 13th. It seems to change day to day. I think we're competing with Jacksonville for whatever reason for size. And it's an exciting time to be a big city mayor and help to bring light to some of these really important topics that should be more important, not just to people like me that live in this crazy abyss of childcare and school and activities and all the things that many of you are in right now as well, but to convince policymakers across this country the future American dream and our success really is hinging upon how we treat our youngest and most vulnerable. And right now, we are just not cutting it, and we have to be better. So thank y'all for letting me spend some time with you.
Thank you so much, Mayor Parker. This is so wonderful to spend time with you. For anyone I don't know, my name is Amber Scanlon. I am PNC's Senior Vice President and Director of Client and Community Relations for North Texas. And part of my work, I am fortunate enough to help bring the resources of PNC Grow Up Great to life here in North Texas. PNC Grow Up Great is our company's $500 million commitment to helping underserved children birth to 5 enter kindergarten prepared to learn. So we work a lot with many of you in this room to focus on infants, toddlers, and very young children so that they have increased access and very high quality early learning programs. I did want to take a moment, if I may, to point out a few people in the room. First and foremost, I would like to introduce Sally McCready. She is the president and chair of the PNC Foundation. She's actually the architect of PNC Grow Up Great. So for those of you in the room who have worked with us in those programming, Sally taught me everything I know. So thank you, Sally, for coming from Pittsburgh and joining us today. It's so wonderful to have you with us. Also, our regional president, Brendan McGuire, is certainly here, and you'll hear from him in a moment. And I know Dale Close, our territory executive, is here as well, and my team as well. So thanks for having us. We're so pleased to present with the DRC this program once again. They're kind enough to let us help poke around and bring this to life, and we just have a blast. They are truly, Dale, Michael, and Jared, wonderful partners. Couldn't do what we do without you, so thank you. And again, thank you, Mayor Parker. You're just so inspiring. We are so lucky to have an elected official who is well-versed and educated and lives the life so many of us live with our young children, and to have you as an advocate in this space. I know Sally's probably as wowed as I am that we have you as an advocate and a partner in this work. So thank you for what you do. So we're just gonna ask a few questions and feel free to go as deep as you like. But first and foremost, you know, COVID is, we talk about it a little bit in the past tense. I think it continues to rear its ugly head a little bit. Unfortunately, I happen to experience that myself in the last couple weeks. But it has changed our national conversation on childcare. Can you talk a little bit about that? Have we said enough? What's more to come? And how should that conversation continue?
No, we haven't, and that's why you're not successful. I mean, look, like right now, President Biden has tried to pass Build Back Better. It seems to be very stalled and probably no hope of that happening until after the midterms, if ever, right? But I've tried to tell people on both sides of the aisle, like, dig in the bill, like, understand what the initiative's about. It's not perfect. There are pieces of it I would throw out, but there are also pieces I really think are important for the country to think about. I'll tell you what's missing, though, are business voices, right? And that's frustrating for me because fortunately or unfortunately, depending on who you talk to on different sides of the aisle, there's been a renewed interest of corporate America in a variety of different issues. I wish they would focus on this one. Just imagine how powerful the programs that you all have in your boardrooms for your employees would be if you also could supplement that with really good, smart government policies across the board, right? What the answer to that is, I don't know. I know that organizations like DRC and your attention to this are immensely helpful, and large respected institutions like PNC, that does help tremendously. I don't have an answer to this, but I can tell you, like in Texas, for instance, the Texas Business Association, or TAB, I guess it's TAB, I've talked to their new CEO about this. Like, this is something that should be a predominant topic that's on your list of things, because for businesses, you're not even really asking for money for your business, right? You're just asking to create better policies to incent around some of these topics. And you often interact as business leaders with Texas Workforce Commission in a way that's a little more effective than mom and pop childcare facilities that actually really helps their bottom line. And now's the time to do it. Not only do you have additional ARPA dollars and money flooding in and other pots of money through Workforce Commission and other state agencies, but you're also in the state of Texas is sitting on between $25 and $28 billion in rainy day money, right? That number keeps fluctuating. Let's use this in huge lifetime investments that will have paid dividends for a whole generation or more. And I think it's up to us as policy leaders and as business leaders to help that conversation, at least in Austin and Washington. Understanding the politics of this is really complicated.
Absolutely agree. The DRC shared with me that a recent report by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce in Texas suggests that inability for working families to access affordable childcare due to workplace absences. This has cost the state as much as $9 billion because of absences and employee turnover. How do you respond to that figure? And in your response, do you have any ideas or thoughts around what we could all be doing differently?
So specifically around childcare. Okay, so I already told you the statistics, right? Women are not in the workforce at the numbers they need to be. And this is what's complicated about this topic. And all of you in this room probably can relate to this, male or female, or even if you have kids, we all are caregivers in some way, some form, right? When something happens in your life that's really disruptive and pulls you out of your day-to-day job, right? And you're immersed in crisis. For those of us during COVID, it was a crisis. You're home trying to teach kindergarten to a kid. It was really hard. I was terrible at it, right, on Zoom. And all of you have stories like that, right? And so for a lot of people who already were struggling in the balance of work and home life, they pulled themselves out, especially mamas, said, I'm not going back right now. I can't do this. I can't find dependable childcare. And it was really involuntary, right? They've managed their budgets as a household as best they can, but they've taken themselves out of the workforce. And we all know, especially for women, as many as just from 1 year to 2 year, the jump and the gap it creates in earning potential and be able to go back in the workforce is as much as 40% less, and that much more difficult to get back in the workforce to begin with. So the way we're supporting families really does matter. We has long-term consequences. In terms of what I think we should be doing, it's more of this discussion, maybe because I've really been in advocacy and public policy for 20 years. I've seen some really effective advocacy campaigns, and I've seen some that were really stupid, many more that were ill-equipped and not prepared to be successful than others. So maybe that should be my goal, right, is let's organize a really effective advocacy campaign around some of these big topics that to me seems easy. This seems low-hanging fruit, right, to try to solve this problem. But we've made everything political, so for some reason that's kind of the difficult piece. So I think that's probably the answer to your question is how we have to go about it, at least in Texas, and then maybe even being an example in Washington for what could work.
Agreed, and you talk so much about the many, many levels of partnership in Tarrant County, with the city, the county, and others around you. It's just beyond impressive. And you also mentioned a little bit about the Blue Ribbon Action Committee. We happen to know about it because we were lucky enough to be involved at PNC. But can you talk more about that Blue Ribbon Committee, what the goals are, how you're working together, and what you hope to accomplish?
So I know that I'm not allowed to go to the meetings. I wanted to go. Kara's like, they're gonna not talk about it as candidly if you're there, so I'm not there. But we selected some of the brightest minds, some of which I had one phone call from a friend who was like, I know nothing about childcare. My kid's going to med school. I was like, that's the point though. I asked him for a reason. He's in a really influential role in Fort Worth and really has that potential, not just Fort Worth people, but across North Texas. And importantly, our big picture is what are the big action items we need to create in conjunction with the private sector around some of these policy changes that need to happen. And so you'll have tangible goals and solutions that I think philanthropy can also participate in as soon as this fall, and then also go to Austin as well. And I think the way we've created the structure and the names attached to it, I think will get more attention rather than another group of people. No offense to those of us that care so deeply about childcare or live it every day. Sometimes our voices aren't as loud as they could be if we had additional support for that work.
Amazing. Can you talk a little bit about how state and federal governments should be working together around policy issues in this space, but then kind of lead into next session? What do you think our biggest, low-hanging fruit opportunities are in Texas?
Right now, it's like just a big dumpster fire at all levels of government, right? It feels like that a little bit. Good question. So first of all, both in Washington and in Austin right now, this has to be bipartisan. So maybe that's where I can help, is I could think of the people now I'd like to have in Austin. If you tried to work in the Senate or in the House, who are your people on both sides of the aisle you could attach to this issue to make it palatable for both parties, right? Which I think is important. And the good thing, again, we're not even going to ask the legislature to come out of general revenue to do some of this work. They're sitting on money and rainy day money, and they're also sitting on federal funds that could be distributed in a way that I think the individual communities, Tarrant County, Fort Worth, Dallas, Plano, all these communities could say, let us have the pilot money and figure out what's best for our communities, right? Wouldn't that be great in the city of Dallas if you were given the money and you know how to deploy that? Rather than what typically happens is this prescription across the entire state of Texas. This is a brand new set of rules and regulations that were really written by bureaucrats rather than practitioners. So that's a complicated thing. This is a little bit off topic to your question, but because you mentioned Washington, D.C. and Austin, for those of us that care about this issue with such, with a lot of intelligence, and all of you have a lot to give, you need to care a lot about what you're seeing in Austin and DC, and honestly, some of your local governments. We're really fortunate in North Texas to keep most of the partisanship and fighting outside of our doors. Unfortunately, our school boards have been infiltrated with that, and it's been incredibly toxic and difficult, I know, for my friends in Fort Worth. But it matters, and I worry about it every day in what I'm seeing, because I'm telling you, we're going to wake up and no one decent's going to run for office. The sacrifice is too great, and there's too much on the line. Why the heck would you do the job, right? And so on these issues that we think could be bipartisan and you could bring people together, and this is one of them, we need to be really tireless in how we work together to have some win, right? In a really toxic environment, pick your location in DC or in Austin.
Fair points. I live in one of those communities in Tarrant County and felt that very closely, unfortunately. You talked a little bit about the role of business in supporting access to childcare. So we talked a little bit about, your experience and many of our experience coming back from maternity leave, and there are countless others. What other role can business play in this conversation? What are you looking for, or what would you like to see in North Texas?
Probably on the advocacy side, think about, are there ways that you could specifically say, I'll support X, Y, and Z led by these organizations that you trust? Talk to your foundations and philanthropy that's working in this space. A lot of them have plenty of expertise and data around what they'd like to see as well, so it's a safe space for businesses to coalesce around. We've been pretty successful around that in Tarrant County. We need to do more as well. And then tell your stories, and I hope maybe that's the service that Best Place for Working Parents can provide to you. The companies that have stepped up in such big ways and really unique, no one's the same, right? I mean, everybody has a really different solution for their workforce, is let us help you tell that story, not just in Fort Worth or in Dallas, by the way, but now across the entire country, as Best Place for Working Parents has really trademarked and continued to grow across the US. So hopefully that's a service to you as well.
Absolutely. More on that topic, in your career, in your time as mayor, have you come across best practices from other cities, states, counties that you'd really like to bring to North Texas?
No. Government's usually the last one to figure this out, honestly. So not necessarily, but I think we're all catching up pretty quickly. And maybe the positive out of COVID, because because of the Great Recession and there's all this clamoring for talent, and salaries continue to grow up, it's difficult for a city to attract and retain top talent. And these are policies that we have to create and be more intentional about in order to keep those employees in place in the first place. So, some of you may have examples across the country or cities that may have done a good job, but for the most part, we could strive to be better. And a lot of these examples are actually not in the US. There are a lot of them in Europe or even in Canada, which doesn't really help the cause. I've had that conversation, like, don't bring up Canada because no one's listening. Every politician loves to hate on Canada for some reason. So we have to find better examples. I don't know how.
And our final question before we move on, one thing we talk about at PNC a lot, we've been focused on early childhood education through PNC Grow Up Great since 2004, and people ask us all the time, well, when are you going to focus on something different? And, our kind of answer is, when this issue we
really grow up great, then we can do that.
When it's solved, and then there becomes an opportunity to look at other things, and that hasn't happened yet. Clearly, is there any moment or lightning rod opportunity you can think of, or I don't want to use the word predict, but what could possibly bring us together to really address this issue holistically so that we can kind of move on?
Well, I think I mentioned earlier, simple, financially, what we're spending in the U.S. on per pupil spending, that has to change. the way we invest in families, whether that's through tax incentives that are additional, actual checks to families, to childcare facilities, it matters. And I'm not talking about a government-run new childcare facility. I mean, I think early Head Start and Head Start is a fantastic example of how you can serve, especially those that are low income and most vulnerable. We're really lucky in Tarrant County and Fort Worth to have one of the best agencies in the country, led by CARA and CCA. But we, in the US, until you change those figures and convince leaders that the way you're investing in our earliest learners will matter to your bottom line long term. So all this discussion we're having, and I care about it right now, probably more than anything, second to childcare, is around what the workforce pathways look for our students coming out of high school, right? Y'all, we're in crisis, and no one's really talking about it other than a few, policy wonks. And our economy will not keep up. You can only import so much talent, and you can't export poverty. They're here, and these families deserve better. And just imagine what had happened, what could have happened if we had invested better when those kids were 0 to 5. And furthermore, the parents, the mothers, the fathers, the grandparents that are trying to go back to school or keep 2 jobs or whatever, they're also trying to juggle childcare. And there's so much to this that's in that cradle to career spectrum we've been working on. So lots of work to do for sure.
Well, you're inspiring. We admire you. We thank you for coming over. I know North Texas is our shared home, and we love to spend a lot of time in Fort Worth for sure. So I know we'll see you probably next week at the Fort Worth Club during
Actually,
lunch.
ate lunch in Dallas. The whole legend is that Amon Carter wouldn't eat lunch in Dallas. He would bring a brown bag if he came over here.
No sales tax.
That's true Fort Worth lore for you. But jokes aside, we are stronger together in North Texas. We are so proud of our partnership in Dallas and Plano and Frisco, and I think they feel the same way with us and with Arlington. North Texas is supposed to be the 3rd largest metro area in past Chicago in the coming years. And there's so much promise around what's happening in this area and community. And I think the partnership and collaboration we have, the model of DFW Airport and many other things that we share needs to continue into the future. And I'm really thankful. You have a great mayor and Mayor Johnson, and your leaders here in this area work really hard for your community. So I appreciate the opportunity to be with you, Dale, and your team at DRC. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Mattie, again. Amazing, impassioned leadership on this topic will help propel our region forward, but most importantly, our country. So thank you for being here today. As noted, and Amber mentioned, PNC Bank is a proud corporate champion for early childhood education. That's why we're happy to support the DRC in launching the Best Place for Working Parents Dallas, a local partner of the National Best Place for Working Parents initiative. Entering its 2nd year, the Best Place for Working Parents Dallas aims to recognize family-friendly workplaces in the Dallas region and raises awareness of the importance of family-friendly policies. PNC Bank believes strongly in the value of family-friendly policies in the workplace for all employees. These policies, such as paid maternity and paternity leave, flexible hours and accommodations, backup childcare and childcare assistance, just to name a few, can benefit a company's bottom line. From a regional workforce perspective, and as employers, we all have the continued need for talent. Family-friendly policies can improve employee retention and satisfaction while offering critical support for working parents and their families. They also help employers raise the top in terms of a job seeker's consideration and can help keep North Texas a great place to live and work, do business, and also play and stay. The initiative utilizes a proprietary business self-assessment to allow employers to quickly determine whether their company qualifies as a best place for working parents by comparing their family-friendly policies and benefits to companies of similar size and industry in the region. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce the 2022 Best Place for Working Parents Dallas honorees. This year, 107 Dallas regional companies have received the designation, compared to 90 through the entirety of 2021. These companies have each demonstrated a commitment to fostering a family-friendly work environment through policies such as dependent healthcare coverage, to remote working options, to on-site childcare. We are proud of the example these employers have set and call upon every employer in the Dallas region to complete the self-assessment and consider opportunities to strengthen their policies and benefits that support working parents. If your company or employer hasn't yet completed the Best Place for Working Parents Dallas assessment, please go to the DRC website and do so. If you haven't explored the 10 recommended family-friendly policies, they are also on the DRC website. And finally, we hope you will spread the word about the program. It's companies like these that help keep the Dallas region a top location for workers and employers alike. Now I'd like to hand it back to Jared Toussaint.
It is just such a great honor to see the types of employers and organizations who are representing our community and stepping up to really be the change that we are hoping to see and to affect. But we have to thank PNC again for their longstanding commitment to this issue and to help us to bring together this type of conversation. I'd also like to thank, once again, Mayor Parker for a terrific discussion. Mayor Parker, if it hasn't already started, I will be starting the Dallas chapter of the Mattie Parker fan club. Just let me know if there's already one. I'll just apply to participate. Terrific discussion. If you would, just please join me in giving her another round of applause. And again, thank you to our sponsors, PNC, our presenting sponsor, and our silver sponsor, Dallas College, our friends who are here and such great leaders in this work. And thank you for all the support and attendance of the organizations and partners who we have here today in such a strong community of early childhood advocates. We hope to see you at our next event, the State of Higher Education, on August the 3rd here at the DRC. Registration is open. We thank you all for coming and have a great day. Thank you so much.